I'm your host, Effie Pilarinu, and today I am connecting with a colleague, a fintech influencer, a futurist, a blogger, a creator, Chris Gledhill from the UK. Hi, Chris.
Hello.
Welcome.
Hello. How are you doing?
Great, great. We haven't seen each other in such a long time. We were just mentioning the last time was in Dubai with that, what was it, magnificent
Yeah,
seven
I
event.
remember that. Yeah, that was awesome.
Yeah. But it was also a time that, you know, if I recall, still fintech was cutting edge or perceived cutting edge or disruptive, and now we are in that next phase where the disruptive feeling comes from, you know, blockchain, crypto, metaverse, and so on. I don't know if you agree with that.
Yeah, I think a couple of years ago, we were still focused on optimizing 20th century banking. So taking loans, mortgages, payments, apps, whatever, making it quicker, cheaper, better. Now I think we're looking at sort of 21st century banking models. So it's getting a lot more exciting. And also back then, people are still talking about fintech is like, oh, is this just a fad? Is this like, you know, has it got legs? Is it going to last for long? I think people are accepting now that fintech's a big deal and it's going to attract more than just pure banking.
Yeah. Maybe I mean, I'm not sure if my memory is correct. Maybe we were still also in that phase of a war that was fading, but a war between banks and fintechs and not, you know, where we are today.
Yeah, there was a lot of that discussion. I think we were coming to the end of that kind of banks versus fintechs. It was very combative. It was very much like the fintechs will destroy the banks, like Netflix destroys Blockbuster. All this kind of stuff was bouncing about everywhere. But yeah, obviously now it's become a lot more collaborative and I guess you could say ancestral a little bit in terms of how the ecosystem sort of evolving with all marketplaces and ecosystems and platformification. Like it's all very much everyone working together now.
And Chris, you know, I've planned some threads to ask you, but I think that we're not going to keep those threads. I mean, you mentioned platforms, and I want to ask you, you know, what are your thoughts about platforms and how that concept and impact connects to what's going on today around crypto, around blockchain, around the metaverse, DeFi, or all that? It's a huge topic, but platforms, DeFi, decentralization, metaverse, share your thoughts.
Yeah, it's interesting. So platform and all these, like I do a lot of work with big banks, right? And every bank has got a slide in their PowerPoint deck that's kind of, it's called a platform, an ecosystem or marketplace. But basically they've got themselves in the middle and then lots of different products and services all spread around the side, right? And then you look at like the Web3 and the DeFi and all that kind of thing. And if you look at all the various platforms, again, they all market themselves as the kind of one platform to rule them all in a kind of Lord of the Rings style. They kind of feel that they're the one-stop shop where customers just need to come to us. They call it, or you might want to call it a super app or whatever, right? They all say we're the central bit and then everybody can sort of feed into us. And then you've got all the big tech giants and they're all busy building their own ecosystems and they're saying, well, everyone, including banks, and everyone can integrate with us, right? So everybody fancies themselves as being the one place that everyone's going to feed in because it's obviously a massive prize. It's like a zero-sum game, right? It's the ultimate business model to have everybody, you know, use your platform and you just hook into everyone. But what I think it's going to evolve into having the customer in the middle and all these other services around the peripheral. I think that seems to be the evolution that I would like to see. I think that's where more the value is, rather than just having lots of people building platforms that using your data and using your money and using all your other facilities around you in the periphery. I'd like it to have a system where we're able to sort of manage our own money and data. But then it gets tricky because then you get into all the sort of self-sovereign kind of arguments about, oh, well, we could be our own bank, we could manage our own data, but then nobody really wants to do that. It's too much cognitive effort. We'd rather just defer that responsibility to somebody else for the convenience, and somebody else would rather take all that power away from us for profit. So it's kind of some hybrid model that doesn't quite exist yet, but I feel that the way it works is us not necessarily mastering our data, but having a lot more control and ownership over the value of our data and the value of our money and assets.
Interesting, interesting. Chris, when did you start shifting into crypto, blockchain, metaverse in terms of your focus? I mean, currently, I understand that you are offering these metaverse workshops because obviously there's demand and interest there. Tell us a little bit how that happened. Was it an abrupt leap or a shift first down the crypto rabbit hole for you personally?
Not really. So I do a lot of sort of consultancy advisory type services with some senior leaders in financial services. And for a lot of them, a new buzzword comes along, it's blockchain or it's metaverse or it's NFTs or whatever. And this is all bounced about and they read all the articles and they see all the reports, but it's very difficult to kind of understand what is this really. So I found that actually there's quite a good opportunity for doing workshops with senior leaders on new technology, but actually just showing them what it is. So, you know, it could be as simple as teaching them about metaverse by putting on a headset and taking them on a guided tour around the metaverse. So I do these workshops where I put on the headsets on a small groups and we go around various metaverses. I show them what works well, what doesn't work well, and they can come away from half an hour in the metaverse. You can learn so much more than a million reports about the future, and you can totally get where it's at in its evolutionary model. And then we have a bit of chatting about, well, what does it mean for our business and what's the opportunities, what's the threats in this new tech? So it's the same with lots of things like NFTs. I help them mint their own NFT. It's all a bit of fun. We'll try it out. Or I do workshops about social media. I'll teach them what their kids are probably doing on Snapchat and TikTok. It's that kind of thing where they need to kind of understand it, but it's best to understand it by actually doing it and playing around with it. So I found that there's good opportunity for learning that way. And that seems to have gone down very well with a lot of people that I do these workshops with.
So with the metaverse, Chris, I mean, we all understand that it's not well defined, it's not shaped, and we're early. When I looked at the Big Fat City report and heard Ronit talk about it, the core word or the key word that came out of that was immersive. So for him or for Sidi, that's the aspect that is, core. Share with us how you think about the metaverse, not with one keyword, but in general. What is it all about, and where does it sit compared to the other technologies?
Yeah, you're right. You could take like 20 of us so-called experts, right? Put us all in a room and we'll all come up with a different definition of the metaverse at the moment.
Yeah.
For me, metaverse is augmented reality and virtual reality combined together. So quite crucially, I include augmented in the whole definition of metaverse. I don't necessarily feel Web3, crypto, that side of thing is necessarily part of metaverse. But you could do metaverse without all that kind of things, but it's possibly an element in it. But yeah, it's augmented reality, virtual reality. And it's something that's been around for a long time. So I include things, virtual worlds like Second Life, games like Minecraft, these kind of things I include as virtual reality and part of metaverse. Augmented reality, things like Pokemon Go, things like even your head-up display in your car that augments, they can superimpose your navigation or your speed over the top of your display. These kind of things, augmented reality, I consider also part of the metaverse. So it's kind of not necessarily a new thing. Obviously, it's got a very popular term since Mark Zuckerberg renamed Facebook to Meta. It's become a popular term, but virtual reality, augmented reality is what I consider to be metaverse.
And do you see that this will stay for a long time as a separate economic activity and grow economic activity beyond? For example, if we take gaming, there's already huge economic activity there, and do you see that growing through this metaverse craze, but still staying very separate from our, what I would call, current reality of economic activity, which is hybrid, but heavily weighted to the physical world?
Yeah, I think it's Metaverse has got quite a few killer apps that will keep it going for a long time. So obviously gaming is a big part of it. I do a lot of gaming in the Metaverse on the Oculus. I've got one of these Oculus headsets here, and you know the immersive games in there are another level compared to console gaming. So I did a lot of console gaming and PC gaming in my past, and the people I speak to in these games, like since they bought a headset, a VR headset, the Xbox, the PlayStation, they're just left gathering dust in the corner now. Like VR is so much more, is orders of magnitude more immersive as an experience. So I see as the VR gaming evolves, that will be the way we work, because obviously we've built all these controllers and joysticks, but they're not great. It's not great having a 2D experience, be it on a TV or a console. Whereas when you're fully immersive, it's a whole nother level of experience. So gaming is obviously going to be killer app for Metaverse, but then obviously things like education as well, pretty awesome industries that have got so much room to grow in there. Like when I was a kid, like subjects like history were I didn't find particularly interesting. It was all about facts and figures. Whereas I imagine for my kids, they can learn about history by being there. They can transport themselves into medieval London or onto a battlefield somewhere, or relive experiences in history. Same with science. You could do all sorts of experiments that you would never be able to do for health and safety reasons in an actual real lab. So there's all these kind of things. I was speaking to a fireman the other day, and they do a lot of their training in Metaverse. So obviously they do a lot of real training for fitness and stuff, but for certain emergency situations, you can't do in real simulations. You've got to have virtual simulations. So obviously there's a lot of Metaverse stuff that's going to carry it. Obviously, like the dawn of the internet, the adult industries were a huge driver for the early internet. The same thing will be the same for the Metaverse. So for pure virtual reality and augmented reality, there's enough there that I feel that I would say Metaverse is the real Web3, not the Web3 that's been sort of touted around at the moment. It's the next evolution of how we're going to be interacting and where we're going to be spending our time.
But that's interesting, Chris, because if the Metaverse is going to lead or accelerate our move into Web3, then to me, it means that decentralization won't be the dominant or core attribute of Web3, because the Metaverse is not focused on decentralization.
Absolutely, yeah. So the Web3 term has been it's been touted as more of a tokenomics and a decentralized version of something. Whereas if we're talking about the evolution of the web, i.e. the way we share information, the way we interact online, then Metaverse is so much more attuned to that. And yes, it doesn't have to be decentralized for it to work. It can be run by a few small tech companies, a few big tech companies, running the show, or it could be run by lots of small companies building their own worlds that people interact with.
But how does that fit, Chris, with what you mentioned before about, monetizing our data, or, having better transparency or privacy in terms of our data, not necessarily decentralization, but better than what is going on now? That is also not something that the Metaverse is focused on.
Yeah, exactly. So we've got to be careful about what we're trying to do. With the Metaverse, it's very much about a user experience. It's a new way of interacting, right? Yeah. What we're bringing into these worlds is all the problems that we have in Web 2 and Web 1 and the real world. So yes, there will be people who want to take our data. There'll be fraudsters, there'll be criminals, there'll be people trying to take advantage of all sorts of things. There'll be businesses, scrupulous and unscrupulous. There'll be all sorts of things coming into these new worlds. And some of the protections that we have in the Web 2 world will move into Web 3. Some of the stuff we'll have to invent whole new mechanisms to protect ourselves in these new worlds. But I don't think Metaverse, we can say that this new tech solves everything. I think we saw that with blockchain, where blockchain came along and they said, well, blockchain is going to cure cancer, world hunger and everything else. It was like they put too much stuff on something. And actually the same is happening with Metaverse. It's just an amazing, really immersive experience. But it doesn't solve everything, and there's a whole load of new problems emerging from them as well.
Yes. So how do you see the Metaverse in finance or financial services, broadly speaking? Except the very basic idea that banks could fund this growth sector, like it could fund any other growth sector in technology. What else do you see there?
Yeah, so financial services, they've kind of dabbled. So there's obviously been a few stories in the past month or so about various banks setting up in the metaverse, buying some virtual land, creating a virtual bank branch. Other sort of more investment-y angles are allowing investors to create portfolios of metaverse related companies or Web3 companies. Then there's obviously, when there's virtual land's been sold for a lot of money and NFTs flying around and getting lost and stolen, then people are talking about insurance for those products and those assets and allowing mortgages in the metaverse. There's all that kind of stuff going on. And then you start talking about like commerce. So if we have e-commerce in Web2, then we have v-commerce in the virtual world. So people are starting to think about, well, how does virtual commerce work and what are the interesting aspects of how you go about buying stuff? And then we're at this stage where, like in the early World Wide Web, where people took the real world analogies and just pushed them into the website. So you literally had shops taking a picture of their shop front and putting it on their website, and you click the door to enter, and they were kind of arranging their website like they with their shop store. We're getting the same sort of stuff in the metaverse now, where people are kind of saying, well, this is just an extension. If we sell trainers in the real world, we can have a virtual shop and sell trainers in the virtual world. And those could be NFT trainers or they could be real trainers. But, I think we can do better from in the metaverse, in the virtual worlds, we're limited by imagination only. We've got multiple dimensions and infinite possibilities. We don't have to just recreate a supermarket in virtual reality and walk up and down virtual aisles and put virtual things in a virtual trolley. It's like that's where we'd start, but I think we can do a lot better than that. So we're kind of starting to look at newer models. Like I attended the Metaverse Fashion Week a couple of months back. I think it was last month actually. That was quite fun because they were talking about fashion in the metaverse, and they had like a virtual catwalk and there was virtual models walking up and down. But what they'd done is they'd looked into the clothes weren't just virtual clothes. They weren't just selling real clothes in the virtual world. They're saying, well, if we have virtual clothes, then these can be animated. These can move. They can have meaning attached to them. People can graffiti on your clothes as you walk past, and all these other things. There's, clothes can be dynamic. They can be virtual. It unlocks all sorts of other possibilities about products and services. So I'm kind of looking forward to what those sort of product services in the metaverse are that we haven't quite thought about yet.
Chris, in my mind, you're one of those early pioneers and early thinkers. When you launched your venture, Seco Aura, I think it was ahead of its time, and it does connect. It does connect with the metaverse and fashion. Tell us a little bit about how what you learned from that venture and how you connect it today to the metaverse.
Yeah, what we're doing in Seco Aura, you could say there's various aspects. There's very much a fashion side of things to it, about how you present yourself. So you digitally augmented your physical self as you went about the place. There was a whole tokenomics angle to it as well. So there was a whole tokenomic system about valuing your personal data and how you could lend, spend, and invest your personal data. There was an augmented reality part of it as well, about how you could broadcast an aura around your physical self. But yeah, it was perhaps a little bit ahead of its time. But certainly that was the feedback we got from a lot of investors. They were not too understanding of what we were trying to achieve. But also the tech was a little bit ahead of its time. It would drain the battery in your phone in about an hour if you were using the app. So it wasn't great from a smartphone point of view either. But yeah, lessons learned from that were that that there is a lot of value in the augmenting of physical self. So the whole kind of Internet of Things is all focused on things. It's not focused on people. And I think there's a lot of augmentations that we're missing from the physical world that are really missing from a technology point of view. So when people go about their daily lives, there's so many visual cues they give off that are just ritual. So people would wear like a ring on their finger to indicate a marital status, or they wear a football shirt to indicate which team they support. There's all sorts of, you wear an ID badge or whatever to indicate who you work for or whatever. There's lots of different things that we hang about ourselves to augment who we are. Whereas if you could have a way of digitally broadcasting that, then it solves all sorts of real world problems, and it kind of creates a whole nother level of interface. It's basically like a missing social media company that we don't have. Like if you look at all the social media companies today, they're all converging into the same thing. You know, they go, oh, we're going to have a Spaces or a Teams or Clubhouse thing, or they go, oh, we're going to have like a, you know, a long form where we're going to allow publishing articles. They're all basically converging to exactly the same model. Whereas
Everybody's
actually
copying each other.
they're all just copying each other. Whereas there's a whole missing social media angle that just doesn't exist. It's kind of a missing unicorn right now. So I feel like what we're doing in Seco, I can see parts of it emerging across the board now. So it was kind of
maybe you tell our listeners because maybe some of them are too young and don't know about Seco. you tell them what you were trying to do in the first version of it.
Yeah, we're probably biting off more than we could chew when we started it. But there was two sides. One was the tokenomic side. So basically you could master your personal information, and then you could lend, spend, invest that information. So to give an example, like today you'd give somebody your email address and then you're giving them permission to just send you emails forever. Whereas we were saying, well, what if you just created a token, a coin, which you can give to somebody that gives them permission to send you one email? So you don't give them your email address, you give them a coin, and every coin they can spend and they can send you an email. And because more people want to send you emails than you want to read emails, then suddenly supply demand economics kicks in and that coin has value. And that value is relative to who you are. And then what you start having is a marketplace where you could start broadcasting your needs, your wants, your hopes, your dreams, your aspirations. And then companies who want to sell stuff to you or market stuff or connect with you, they could buy these tokens to get in contact with you, because they're basically buying 30 seconds of your attention span. And that's just one data item. That's just kind of your email address. We were doing that across the board for a lot of the information. So we're basically creating a way, you know, everyone's going, oh, data is the new oil and we need to like monetize data. This was actually creating a model where you could actually practically do that in a sensible real world scenario. And then the other side of that combined was the augmented physical self. So where you could go about your daily lives with your smartphone in real world, but broadcast to a 100-yard radius a digital interface about your physical self. So that solves all sorts of problems. You know, like when we go to these conferences in Fintech, you go into a room and there's like 300 people there and everybody's like running around trying to network and meet the right people. It's like, you know, you look at it from above, it looks like a disturbed ant nest, like lots of ants running around trying to network. It'd be better if you walk into the room and, you know, immediately half the people in the room are probably looking for a new job and half the people are probably hiring for roles. If you could immediately do a matchmaking service on that, you know, or if you could look at, you know, who's relevant, who do you need to talk to, you know, or, you know, that kind of stuff, or who do I have in what I have in common with people. You know, we don't have that mechanism. It's very much about you know, trying to practically network and find people. And then there's also the other angle, which is that it's not just a practical use, there's an emotive use. People want to broadcast stuff about themselves that they feel important. So if people are particularly passionate about a particular cause or something like that, they want to tell people about it, right? I was joking the other day about Tesla drivers. You know, you can't talk to a Tesla driver for more than a minute without them telling you that they drive a Tesla, because they really want you to know, you know, that's a value to them. It's like an identity. So it's kind of, you know, having a digital way of broadcasting that kind of thing is kind of important. That's where you go back to things like fashion. You know, if you could broadcast, not just, you know, if you see a nice outfit on somebody, and if you could bring out your phone and you could find out about, you know, that outfit's tagged, it's got who designed it, where can I buy it, is it sustainable, is it, you know, zero slave labor involved in the development of this outfit, all these kind of things, you know, you can find that stuff out. That's that sort of digital augmentation. You're basically reading a label from afar. And if you put that on not just fashion, but all sorts of things, the same thing in, you see it in lots of different industries. If you look at like the military, right, you have medals, you have rank, you have these kind of things that show who's a specialist in what and what's their seniority. In the business world, we don't necessarily have that, but it might be useful to understand just by, you know, looking at people having a digital way that could say, you know, are they a UX designer? Are they a full stack developer? Are they, you know, a Scrum Master? You know, what's their level? We can have, you know, all these kind of proficiencies, all these tokens, all these kind of qualifications. You can hang off you like digital medals. So there's also, it was a massive opportunity, and it's kind of a bit ahead of its time. It's probably something that needs rekindling, or it'll pop up somewhere else. But that was like the big vision that we had.
You know, Chris, I remember very well the example that you mentioned. One of the that had stood out in my mind of you know, me walking down the street, seeing another woman wearing an outfit that I like, you know, using my phone to figure out what that outfit is, and basically rewarding that other women should be rewarded by the store that sells that stuff because, you know, they benefited through her because I will go to the store. So it's tokens. You can think of it as the next level of affiliate marketing that is really not on a platform, but it's live, walking around.
It's like what's going on with like Instagram and Spotify. There's, you know, you can wear an outfit, you post on Instagram, people start buying it off you. So essentially you're becoming the shop front. So instead of your online and offline, the people themselves become the, like you said, the affiliate marketing. But also the interesting tokenomic side is that a compliment is equivalent. It's like a like, right? It's like a plus, it's like a heart, whatever, you like this thing. But that like is relative to who's issuing the like. And this is where it kind of gets interesting, because if I compliment someone in the outfit, that means nothing, right? Because I know nothing about fashion, or I know very little. Nobody cares what I think about fashion. Whereas if I'm a big fashion designer in London fashion house somewhere, and I like somebody's handbag or their shoes or their outfit or whatever, that is worth infinitely more. So what we're starting to do is create an economic system that's where the value of something is relative to who you are, what you're about. It's very contextual, which is different to the economic system we have at the moment, which is very linear. So right now we have a linear wealth system where you've got like Elon Musk or Jeff Bezos at one end, and then you've got a homeless person at the other end. And we're all on this scale somewhere where you add up your house, your assets, your money, and you go, okay, here's where you are. This is how wealthy you are. Whereas that's rubbish. In the real world, your wealth is so much more than just your financial wealth. Like you go to your job to get financial wealth, you go to the gym to get health wealth, you go to your college to get knowledge wealth, right? You go to work to get skills wealth. There's lots of different types of wealth that exist, and we don't have a system that readily manages that and also works out the value in that. So we've got a system that, you know, rewards investment bankers a lot more than it rewards people who care for cancer patients. And I would say that, you know, that's because we've got some weird skewed societal system where you can create something where your value is the contents of your character, not the size of your wallet. Then that's more of a future that we were trying to, that was kind of the vision that we're trying to build in Seke.
Yes, and you know, what you say now connects to the idea of having digital twins of different parts of our personality, and earning, having those avatars earn tokens, money, whatever it is, through these digital twins. Because as you said, there's different aspects of us that today are not at all rewarded through tokens or money, even though we all agree that these intangible values are very valuable, but we don't have a system to reward them.
Yeah, exactly. And that's where you start looking at things like NFTs popped up. So once we get beyond the stupid monkey images that are going on in NFTs, start looking at some real usefulness, then you start looking at this and saying, well, what is this? This is like a container for value. It's a mechanism for holding some kind of token, right? And then you can start to say, well, that could be the compliment, the referral, the like, the recommendation, these kind of things that you can then attach to a wallet or a profile, and you can use these. These become the sort of the digital. You start looking at something a bit more useful coming out of some of this newer tech, and that's what I love about all these things. We have to go for this necessary kind of gold rush, wild west of a thing when new tech comes along before the practical useful stuff comes out. And that's where I kind of see things like NFTs going in a long-term roadmap. Like at the moment, you know, we go to these conferences and people giving out laptop stickers and you stick them to your laptop, right? I see in the future those could be NFTs that say I've done something, I've been somewhere, I've achieved something, I've met somebody. You know, it's like having the, you know, if we're old enough to remember when we had stamps in my passport, right? Those kind of things, like having stamps for lots of other things. It's all those kind of mechanisms that we can digitize and have a platform for doing it. And that's what we're missing in some of these things. Like NFTs are missing the canvas, right? You can collect NFTs, but you can't show them off, right? And it's like having art with no wall to hang it on. And there's
but that will be built soon. I mean, I can't imagine that it won't be built soon.
Yeah, they will. So I do this. I've got a bit of I call it like a periodic table of unicorns. So I've kind of created a, you know, like periodic table of chemical elements. And they actually found new chemical elements by doing the table and saying, well, there's a missing one here because there's, you know, there should be an element right here. It's the same for unicorns. If you map out all the unicorns that exist across financial services and in society in general, you start saying, actually, there's massive gaps where nobody's actually got a startup going here. There's no unicorn in this particular space. And if you look at like NFT canvas, there's, you know, we're missing a unicorn, right? There's unicorns missing all over the place. If you look at micropayments, missing a unicorn. If you look at v-commerce identity, we're missing a unicorn. Like there's massive startups that will fill these spaces in the next sort of 5 to 10 years, because it's just necessary. It has to be. It's logically that there has to be a startup here, or that some company will fill this space eventually. But it's fascinating when you start, instead of, you know, we obsess and idolize about the unicorns of fintech. What we don't look at is the absent ones, the absent friends, which kind of that are totally necessary to solve something. And when these startups pop up, we go, oh, that was obvious. We always needed, you know, we always needed an investment thing like Robinhood. We always needed a transfer thing like TransferWise. It's so obvious now, but before they existed, it wasn't obvious, right? It was, you know, right. We just dealt with how it was. So that's what fascinates me as well from a futurist point of view. It's kind of mapping out kind of where these things are going and then spotting the emerging ones. And then that's part of what I do also as part of my living, is helping to particularly venture capitalists identify these gaps and which companies are potentially going to emerge and fill these gaps.
So would you be able to share some ventures that you are excited about right now? That may be early, whether it's names or sort of what they're doing?
Yeah, so there's a couple of things I'm quite excited about. So certainly identity in the metaverse is quite a big problem, or a big opportunity, I suppose, because it's quite interesting, because when you're in the metaverse, you can pick your own avatar. You can be whoever you want in the metaverse. A lot of people start off by trying to create an avatar that looks like themselves, and then you interact. But then you think, well, I can be whoever I want and I can do whatever, you know. So we don't necessarily need that. But then you've got this problem of how do you identify people? How do you know who you're speaking to? And we kind of feel like we need that comfort zone. We need to identify, you know, who this is. And that's where, like, these problems have been solved. All these things, like half the job as a futurist is to look back in time into history about what happened. Like if you look at medieval battlefields, we had people in suits of armor and they all had helmets on, and you couldn't work out who was who. So everyone was fighting each other, and you couldn't work out if you're fighting an enemy or a friend. And then somebody said, well, why don't we have on the shield? We could have a coat of arms. We could have an image on the shield which shows who's a friend and who's a foe. And that's exactly what we're doing with things like NFTs, with a Bored Ape Yacht Club. You're basically saying, I'm part of this group, I'm part of this clan, I'm part of this club, and here's a way to display that. So you can start having these kind of NFTs opportunities for ways of identifying people. The same thing in like, so there's some startups that are doing this. The same for, like I've been to a couple of beer company launches in the metaverse. So I think it was Heineken and Budweiser opened virtual bars in the metaverse, and you go along and you have a virtual beer with virtual people in a virtual bar. It's all a bit gimmicky and markety, but the problem was that on the door there's a bounce on the door says, are you over 18? And you go yes, and they let you in. Like, you know, it's 2022, you know, we can do better than that. I'm sure there's plenty of, you know, people underage could just walk straight through there without any problems, right? So it's actually worse than the real world in terms of how that's managed. So there's some startups that are looking at how we can authenticate. The same thing with some of the real world things like biometrics, facial recognition, fingerprint recognition. These kind of things don't work if everybody's dressed up as a rainbow unicorn in the metaverse, or a pink squirrel. You can't do facial recognition on a pink squirrel. So we need to, how do you identify who this person is? And that's where you come back to things like, I don't know, gesture-based recognition. Well, gesture-based recognition, we've had that for a long time. It's called a signature. You know, so maybe signatures are going to make a comeback. So you start looking at, you know, there's all sorts of people looking at these interesting problems and solving them ahead of the time so that they can be bolting into whichever. So they're the ones that are going to do really well, because eventually, like Mark Zuckerberg's Meta or various other, you know, Apple Metas and various other Metas will pop up, and they'll go, well, how are we going to manage e-commerce? How are we going to do a checkout experience? How are we going to do identity? And they're going to be hoovering up all these startups that have already kind of fought ahead of the game and solve these particular problems. So I love all those startups that are thinking ahead about the problems and solving a problem that's only just emerging.
Yeah, which I guess is very basic. Identification, authentication. I mean, obviously that's the biggest thing. Why do you think, you mentioned earlier about crypto, that it is not necessarily going to be a part of the metaverse? Why do you think that? Don't you think that we need some type of native money for all these commerce economic activities that are going on in the metaverse?
Not really. So I think metaverse can exist without crypto. I don't think it's a necessary thing. Just like in the real world, you can exist. Yes, we've got lots of different currencies all over the place. And it's pretty inconvenient, but if you look at how many different cryptos, there's thousands and thousands of different types of crypto bouncing about. The problem is everybody's saying, well, ours is the crypto that's going to be the standard in the metaverse. But no, I don't see why v-commerce can't be that different from e-commerce in terms of which currencies we use. So no, I can see that if you look at computer gaming, most computer games have a closed loop system, a wall garden approach, where you convert your dollars into unicorn pounds or diamonds or whatever it is. They have their own kind of closed system, but that's to avoid e-money licensing. They want to be more of a game rather than an e-money issuer. Once you have these virtuals, if you have a currency, then it becomes an e-currency, and then you've got all the on ramps and off ramps, and it just becomes it's an unnecessary hassle. That something that doesn't, we don't need to, if I'm going to buy something in the metaverse, why do I need to buy it in a token? Why can't I just buy it in dollars or pounds or euros? The same thing in the real world. I can buy it with a cryptocurrency, but I can buy it in dollars, pounds, and euros. It's not a necessary side of things.
Yeah, but isn't it true that if we do get to this economy in the metaverse that grows, and you want to keep those assets in the economy and not take them out, wouldn't you want to have all those financial services that we have in the regular world of earning interest on our assets, whatever our assets are in the digital world, of borrowing and all that stuff?
Yeah, so it's interesting. So I don't, I it's kind of as a futurist, people expect me to be extremely passionate about Web3 and DeFi and all the different various tokens. But actually, if we look back again, like when people were defining the standard for the World Wide Web, they actually built in a payments mechanism, a way that we were going to monetize every website, and it was going to be a pay-per-use kind of model where the browser was the kind of the vending machine for information, and that was how it's going to work. But we managed to do Web 2 or Web 1. We managed to do the internet without creating a whole new monetary system. It would have been so much better if we said, right, as a global people, as human race, we're all going to get on this thing called the internet and communicate and we should have one standard web language, we should have one standard web currency, we should all, but no, actually we all went our separate ways and built our own little systems, and exactly the same thing in the metaverse. We don't need, yes, it would be lovely if we could all get together and as a globe, as a planet, and go, yes, let's all define Metacoin and we're all going to use that now, and that would be super. But in reality, it's never going to happen. And I guess part of my job as a futurist is not to oversell things, because futurists have been going on about flying cars and robot butlers and bases on the moon and all these kind of things that we say, well, it's all going to happen. But no, it's not, because politics and people and real world get in the way. And that's one of the situations that, yes, it would be super and lovely if we could all hold hands and sing together and build one coin for everything. But if you look at what's going on in the real world outside, I don't think the globe is quite ready for that level of cooperation.
Yeah. I mean, what you're saying is that our world has always been with never harmonized on anything, right? Be it money, be it videotapes, be it CDs, be it anything. I mean, the electricity standards. We've been used, and we're operating with different standards, and given what's going on with the sort of reversal of outsourcing and all these globalization trends that are going the other way, unfortunately, I guess what you're saying is that it will probably stay like that, fragmented.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what we're seeing. All these different worlds are popping up everywhere, and they've all got their own little systems and whatever. And it's exactly the same as it's always going to be. And you're quite right, you're using analogies like plugs and electricity currents, and we drive on the left and you drive on the right. And if you're an alien coming to planet Earth, you say, what is this madness? What utter total nonsense have you created here? You guys are so inefficient. Just have one body that's going to create standards and sort it out. But no, we don't do it because for political reasons and for economic reasons and innovation as well, because standards are great, but they slow things down. If you look at what's going on in standardizing USB sockets for phones and chargers and these kind of things, yes, it'd be great if we could all have the same standard for whatever. but then we're not going to move forward very quickly if we all have to move forward as one whole thing. The pace of humankind has been by people who reach for the stars and push something forward, and then everybody slowly catches up with that, and it drags things along. You don't make progress by everybody getting around a table and trying to work out a standard for anything.
Yeah. Chris, we could be talking forever. I mean, these are extremely interesting topics, and you are immersed in these. Before we close, what are your thoughts in terms of metaverse hubs? And I'm asking you are in the UK. It's been a major fintech hub. Where do you see hubs developing? I mean, given the fact that you believe that the metaverse is all about AR and VR, is that where we should be looking to see where those technologies are, evolving and are getting funded and are scaling, or is it a whole different game?
So it's both, actually. So yes, the UK has obviously been a humongous hub for fintech, right? Because we've got pretty big advantages in the UK, giving it historical advantage, a stable financial system, legal system, government and tech and finance all together within a few miles in London. So we've got some amazing advantages there. The same with Metaverse. There's amazing innovations going along. They call it the Golden Triangle between London, Oxford University, Cambridge University, kind of all within an hour's drive. There's so many startup companies doing all sorts of cool stuff, not just in CRISPR gene editing, in quantum computing, and yes, in Metaverse as well. So naturally, in the UK, we have these hubs that people are looking at AR and VR a lot, and I go to quite a lot of these Eventbrites and meetups for people who are starting companies all over the place in that space. But also, though, I guess with Metaverse, you could say, well, should we take the opportunity with the virtualization of it all to have to transcend geographical hubs, and why don't we create some meta hub, right? So why don't we have some metaverse version where we could all have our incubator accelerator based in the metaverse, and we could all meet there, and we don't really have to care so much about where everybody's from and all those kind of logistical problems and all that kind of thing. So I'd like to see once virtual spaces emerge into somewhere where we want to spend some real amounts of time in, I would like then hubs to develop in these virtual spaces, and people meet up there and start sharing ideas that way. I think that would be pretty awesome.
Fantastic, Chris. Thank you so much. It was really a wonderful conversation. And again, thank you for your time and your insights.
Thank you.